He's coming. Get the lights.
Surprise!
Oh, you guys remembered!
Happy birthday, Lizard!
Thanks, Snake!
My name's Bill.
Ah, sorry, Bill.
With over 1,000 monsters to choose from in D&D, it can be hard to know which ones to use, and even harder to know how to play them. What weapons do they favor? What tactics would they use? How do they interact with other types of monsters? These are all questions that can come up to DMs that are looking to make their combats more enticing for their players. It's certainly one that I struggled with. That's why I'm back today with another monster breakdown for D&D. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bill from Alt-Roll, and today I'm going to dive into a brief history of a D&D creature, how that history was adapted into 5th edition, and how this lore can help game masters make their combat encounters better. So, whether you're here for the cool lore breakdown or for the combat tactics, I'm hoping to give you a lot more to chew on when it comes to the monsters we face in D&D. For episode 12, let's examine some territorial tribals that are just as likely to eat you as they are to welcome you. Lizardfolk. Lizardfolk are a race of anthropomorphic reptiles, commonly based on lizards, alligators, crocodiles, snakes, and dinosaurs. While having no central inspiration to trace back to historically, the idea of lizardfolk has been fairly common in fantasy and science fiction. In the 1920s and 1930s, lizardmen were common antagonists in writing, popping up as villains throughout Robert E. Howard's King Kull stories and The Lizardmen of Below by Francis Flagg. Over the many years since, lizardmen began popping up in television shows as well, such as the Gorn in Star Trek and the Silurians of Doctor Who. Often associated with swamps and jungles where reptiles generally reside, many lizardfolk have been depicted with the cultural elements of those areas, such as the Mesoamerican themes seen in Warhammer's Lizardmen. Of all the mediums they've been in, lizardfolk are probably most prevalent in gaming, being found in media like the Legend of Zelda series, the Elder Scrolls series, Warhammer, and Dungeons & Dragons. In D&D, lizardfolk were first introduced in the Greyhawk rulebook in 1975. Originally described as primitive reptilian humanoids that ranged from 6 to 7 feet tall, the lizardmen of OD&D had a rude intelligence that was mostly used to make weapons. While later editions expanded on their tribal culture, societal hierarchies, and traits as a playable race, the lizardfolk's main characteristic was their love of humanoid flesh, which disappeared a bit in 3rd and 4th edition, but came back for their 5th edition lore. In 5th edition, lizardfolk are described as primitive reptilian humanoids that lurk in the swamps and jungles of the world. Building their villages in abandoned ruins and dank caves, lizardfolk are fiercely territorial, sending hunting parties to harass, kill, or eat anyone foolish enough to wander close. Very few lizardfolk will stray beyond their borders, however, out of fear of being hunted themselves. You see, for lizardfolk, survival always comes first. As truly neutral creatures, they have no sense of morality or honor, and will do whatever it takes to live another day. This mindset comes from their religious beliefs, as lizardfolk worship Semu-Anya, the god of survival and propagation. As a god, Semu-Anya is amoral, uncaring, and unfeeling, but lizardfolk revere him enough to appoint shamans to oversee the rites and ceremonies to honor him. These shamans tend to take up leadership roles for the tribe as a result, using magic to inspire fear and respect in their members. On rare occasions, however, a newborn lizardfolk will be touched by Sesenek, a reptilian demon lord who seeks to corrupt and control the lizardfolk. These large reptiles grow into lizard kings and lizard queens, usurping the shaman's authority to make their tribe more outwardly aggressive and expansionist. When it comes to their society, Lizardfolk have a very traditional tribal system. When not under the direction of a lizard king or queen, they can be known to form lasting alliances with more helpful or trustworthy neighbors, even if they would be a tasty snack. Lizardfolk communicate with each other in Draconic, which is believed to have been taught to them by dragons in ancient times. Tribes who wander into the territory of a dragon will attempt to gain its favor, which evil dragons will exploit for their own ends. Occasionally, Lizardfolk will take prisoners back to their camps, setting them up to be the centerpiece of a great feast. During these feasts, they dance, tell stories, and engage in ritual combat with one another before devouring the creature in the name of Semuanya. When not hunting or feasting, Lizardfolk will craft tools, jewelry, and weaponry out of their victims' bones. In summary, Lizardfolk are tribal hunters who focus on survival above all else, but are susceptible to dominion by powerful lizard kings and queens to become a dangerous threat to all nearby creatures. Now that we've examined their lore, let's pivot over to the Lizardfolk's mechanics by looking at their stat block. This is what the Lizardfolk's stat block looks like. Let's break it down section by section and look at what's listed here in detail. Starting at the top, we have their size, creature type, and alignment. Size in 5th edition defines the space a creature takes up in combat, with a medium creature taking up a 5 foot by 5 foot square or hex on a battle map. Using the 3.5 edition Dungeon Master's Guide, shown here, Lizardfolk can be between 4 to 8 feet tall and weigh anywhere between 60 and 500 pounds. Their creature type is humanoid, with Lizardfolk in parentheses. Lizardfolk are a family of related humanoid lizards that includes Lizardfolk, Lizardfolk shamans, and Lizardfolk kings and queens. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes toward society and order. The alignment of the Lizardfolk is true neutral, meaning that they prefer to steer clear of moral questions and don't take sides, doing whatever seems best at the time. Below that top bar are the rest of the Lizardfolk's stats, which are essential for the Dungeon Master to play the creature in combat. The Lizardfolk has an armor class of 15, 4d8 plus 4 hit points, or 22 on average, and a movement and swim speed of 30 feet. I'll note here that this armor class includes the use of a shield, so if the Lizardfolk is wielding a two-handed weapon, their armor class would be lowered to 13. Looking at their ability scores, they have 15 strength, 10 dexterity, 13 constitution, 7 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 7 charisma. With 10 being average for an ability score, the Lizardfolk has high strength, constitution, and wisdom, average dexterity, and low intelligence and charisma. For their skills and proficiencies, Lizardfolk have a +3 to perception, a +4 to stealth, a +5 to survival, a passive perception of 13, speak Draconic, have a proficiency bonus of +2, have a challenge rating of 1/2, and award 100 experience points when killed. In terms of special abilities, the Lizardfolk can hold its breath for up to 15 minutes. For offensive actions, the Lizardfolk has a bite attack, a heavy club attack, a javelin attack, a spiked shield attack, and the multi-attack feature, which allows it to make 2 melee attacks, each with a different weapon, per attack action. The bite attack has a +4 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d6 +2 piercing damage on a hit. The heavy club attack has a +4 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d6 +2 bludgeoning damage on a hit. The javelin attack has a +4 to hit, a melee reach of 5 feet, a thrown range of 30 feet normally and 120 feet at disadvantage, and deals 1d6 +2 piercing damage on a hit. Lastly, the spiked shield has a +4 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d6 +2 piercing damage on a hit. Last up, we have their environment tags. When using digital resources, we can see that lizardfolk tend to be found in forests and swamps. Now that we've gone through and sorted out their stat block, we can begin to relate the lizardfolk's lore and abilities to how we should be using them in combat encounters. Specifically, we're going to look at how they behave, how they would approach a combat situation, and how to get into the mind of a lizardfolk if you want to fight effectively as one. How do we do this? Well, we'll need to take the lore and stat blocks of the monster and compare that with how that information is intended, referencing tactics and interpretations from The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amon. Let's start by going through Amon's key assumptions one by one and relating them to the lizardfolk as we go. The first of Amon's assumptions is that most creatures want to survive, and if seriously wounded, will try to flee combat. Exceptions to this rule are fanatics or intelligent beings who believe they'll be hunted down and killed if they do flee. Seriously wounded can be subjective, but we can assume that threshold to roughly be 1/3 of the creature's health. With an average of 22 hit points, 1/3 of that would be rounded down to 7. Given their survival-focused nature, it's safe to assume that if reduced to 7 hit points or fewer, a lizardfolk will begin to flee combat. Next up, let's look at how their alignment can impact their thinking. On the scale of good to evil, good creatures tend to be friendly to others, whereas evil creatures are hostile to others. On the scale of lawful to chaotic, lawful monsters may try to capture or non-lethally subdue others, whereas chaotic monsters would just kill them. Since lizardfolk are true neutral, we know that their behavior is going to be highly situational. They're going to remain relatively neutral in most situations, and can be more hostile or passive depending on whatever the situation calls for. Continuing with their mindset, let's dive into some of their mental ability scores. Lizardfolk have an intelligence score of 7. With regards to intelligence scores of 7 or less, Amon states, "A creature with intelligence of 7 or less operates purely from instinct. That doesn't mean it uses its features ineffectively, only that it has one preferred modus operandi and isn't going to be able to adjust if it stops working." This just means that lizardfolk are going to be fairly straightforward with how they fight, and even if that's not the most effective method, they're going to keep trying it until they or their foe are defeated. Lizardfolk also have a wisdom score of 12. With regards to wisdom scores of 12 or 13, Amon states, "A creature with wisdom of 12 or higher will choose targets carefully, and may even refrain from combat in favor of parley if it recognizes that it's outmatched." While not intelligent while they're fighting, a lizardfolk will know when they begin losing a combat encounter, and are willing to negotiate with opponents that they don't think they can defeat. Now that we've set up how they think, let's look at the lizardfolk's physical abilities that influence how they fight. Thinking like Amon, we can assume the following. Creatures with high strength focus on melee combat and won't need to compensate with great numbers. As such, they won't need to outnumber an enemy to be willing to take the fight. Creatures with low dexterity will need to choose their battles carefully. Since their ability to avoid damage is poor, they'll want some other sort of compensatory advantage. Creatures with high constitution typically have a hit point advantage over their enemies, and because of that, they're less likely to hide in combat since they can soak up a couple attacks before going down. To recap our earlier stat block examination, Lizardfolk have high strength, average dexterity, and high constitution. Comparing this to the assumptions we put forward, Lizardfolk are melee brawlers who will seek to close the distance and kill their target before their target can kill them. The last major premise from Amon is that in D&D 5th edition, unless otherwise specified, any creature gets their full movement, 1 action, 1 bonus action, and 1 reaction, just like any player character does. Amon posits that any creature that exists within the game world will have evolved in accordance with this rule, and it will seek to obtain the best possible result from the action economy of the game. This means they will combine whatever movement, actions, bonus actions, and reactions are available to it for the best possible outcome. For Lizardfolk, this means taking advantage of their stealth bonus as well as their multi-attack feature. Before an engagement, Lizardfolk are likely to use stealth to try and remain hidden from their targets, sneaking closer until they get within range of their javelins. If in watery areas, Lizardfolk might also hide in nearby sources of water, holding their breath while they wait for the right moment to strike. Whether the ambush is successful or not, they'll launch their javelins against their foe and then close the distance to get into melee range and use their bite and club attacks to get 2 attacks per turn. Once in melee, it's unlikely that they'll attempt to re-enter stealth, saving that for a sneaky escape should the fight begin to turn against them. So, with all these assumptions laid out and applied to Lizardfolk, what do we now know about how to use them in combat? First, Lizardfolk are pack hunters that use ambush tactics to kill foes they believe they can handle. Due to their neutral nature, Lizardfolk are very flexible in how they approach a situation, and may choose to engage in roleplay if the party appears more powerful than them. As an opponent, though, they'll use their stealth and melee skills to knock out or kill their opponent quickly. Second, Lizardfolk don't use a lot of fancy tactics beyond basic ambushes, but are very smart in whether they choose to fight at all. A Lizardfolk hunting party may choose to harass adventurers out of their territory or try and barter with them before engaging in an all-out brawl. But the moment that trespassers show any weakness, they'll use that opportunity to strike. Third, if reduced to 7 hit points or fewer, reduced to half their starting number, or if their leader is killed, a Lizardfolk or group of Lizardfolk will begin to flee combat. Fourth, if Lizardfolk win a combat encounter, it's up to the DM's discretion whether they kill and eat their defeated foes there, or capture them to bring back to the tribe. Parties defeated in this way will either have to escape through their own methods, or risk being devoured for the honor of Semu Anya. Fifth, while these are the standard behaviors of Lizardfolk, they can be much more aggressive under a Lizard King or Queen. Due to the influence of Sesenek, some tribes may choose to engage in combat against stronger foes, expand outside their normal territories, or not run away from combat, meaning their behavior is going to be relatively unpredictable. And with that, we come to the end of today's video on the Lizardfolk. Despite being around since the earliest editions of D&D, Lizardfolk stand today as a very flexible monster option that don't have a lot of specific ways that you need to play them. While this flexibility allows dungeon masters to use them in a variety of ways, I feel that this, unfortunately, leads to them feeling like they don't really have any unique character. Sure, they're good for a meme or two about eating human meat, but as a monster for the party to face, they kind of blend into being a generic D&D brute rather than an interesting and deep race to explore. However, what I want to know is, what do you think of the Lizardfolk? Do they have enough going on in your games to be interesting on their own? Or do you think that they need some more lore that makes them stand out? You can let me know down in the comments section, or you can discuss it on the Alt-Roll Discord using the link in the description. While on the server, you can pop into our courses that teach the basics of D&D, and if you like what we do, supporting us on our Ko-fi goes a long way in helping us keep Alt-Roll going. However, that's all I had for you. Thank you all for watching, make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.